I stared at the email notification that had just popped up on my screen, my coffee mug frozen halfway to my lips. The subject line read, "Immediate protocol change," and it was from Marcus, my boss at Cortech Solutions. My stomach dropped as I read his message. "All comms through HR now," he had written in all caps, like he was shouting at me through the computer. The email continued with cold corporate language about communication protocols and departmental oversight. But the real message was crystal clear: he was cutting me off from my clients. I had questioned his decision to fire Global Tech Industries just 2 hours earlier, and this was his retaliation. I typed back a simple "understood," while my mind raced with possibilities he never saw coming. 3 years ago, when I first walked through the glass doors of Cortech Solutions here in Austin, the company had exactly 6 clients and a dream of revolutionizing small business software. Now, as I sat in my corner cubicle overlooking the bustling tech corridor on South Lamar, we managed 230 accounts generating over $8 million annually. 24 of those accounts were mine, and they represented the crown jewels of our client portfolio. My name is Zoe, and at 30 years old, I had built something I was genuinely proud of. After earning my MBA from the University of Texas, I had joined Cortech as their 3rd account manager. Being a single mother to my 8-year-old daughter Emma meant every decision carried extra weight. This job wasn't just about my career ambitions. It was about providing stability for both of us. The morning had started like any other Tuesday. I arrived at 7:30, grabbed my usual vanilla latte from the lobby cafe, and settled into my routine of checking overnight emails from clients across different time zones. That's when I noticed the termination notice in our system for Global Tech Industries. My heart had practically stopped. Global Tech wasn't just any client. They were our largest single account worth $450,000 annually. More importantly, their CEO, Robert Sterling, had become a trusted partner over 2 years of collaboration. When their previous software provider had left them scrambling during a compliance audit, I had personally spent weekends helping them transition to our platform. Robert had even invited me to speak at their annual leadership conference about strategic vendor partnerships. But what really concerned me about the termination was a specific clause I had negotiated into their contract. During the initial negotiations, Robert had insisted on investor protection language. His board included representatives from a major private equity firm, and they required any software vendor to include provisions for contract termination if material misrepresentation of capabilities occurred. I had worked with our legal team for weeks to craft language that protected both parties while giving Global Tech the security they needed. When I saw Marcus preparing the termination notice, I had walked directly to his office. The sales floor was buzzing with its usual morning energy representatives making calls and typing follow-up emails. Marcus sat behind his mahogany desk, his sleeves rolled up, and his attention focused on his dual monitor setup. At 42, he projected confidence that had initially impressed me, but lately something felt different about his leadership style. "Marcus, I need to ask about the Global Tech termination," I had said, standing in his doorway. He looked up with an expression that immediately put me on edge. "What about it?" "Their contract has investor protection clauses. If we terminate without cause, it could trigger a broader review of our client relationships. Robert Sterling sits on the board of 3 other companies that could become prospects for us." Marcus had stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. "Zoe, I don't need you second-guessing strategic decisions. Global Tech is demanding features we can't deliver on their timeline. It's better to cut ties cleanly." That response had triggered alarm bells in my mind. I knew our product roadmap intimately, and Global Tech had only requested integrations that were already in development. Their timeline requests were reasonable, especially considering their contract value. Something didn't add up. "Can you walk me through which specific features they're requesting that we can't deliver?" I had pressed. Marcus's face had flushed slightly. "Look, I've been managing client relationships longer than you've been here. I don't owe you explanations for every business decision." The dismissive tone had stung, but what happened next was worse. He had walked past me onto the sales floor and announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Effective immediately, all client communications go through HR for approval, no exceptions." The entire sales team had looked up from their desks. Jennifer from the Northwest Territory had raised her eyebrows. Paul from Enterprise Sales had actually stopped mid-phone call. The humiliation burned in my chest as I realized Marcus was making an example of me for daring to question his judgment. That's when the retaliatory email arrived. As I read his formal directive about communication protocols, I felt something shift inside me. Marcus thought he was cornering me, but he had actually given me exactly what I needed: documented permission to loop HR into every single client interaction. I opened my client database and pulled up the contact information for my 24 accounts. If Marcus wanted all communications to go through HR, then that's exactly what he would get. I started drafting the first termination notice, making sure to copy Sarah Martinez from HR on every single message. The first email went to Patricia Wong at MedDevice Corp., one of our fastest-growing accounts. As I typed the termination notice, I included specific reference to the contract terms that would be triggered by early cancellation. Within 15 minutes, Sarah had responded with a question mark and a request for more context about the sudden policy change. By lunchtime, I had sent termination notices to 3 clients, each one copied to HR as Marcus had demanded. But something interesting was happening as I reviewed the contract terms for each cancellation. I began noticing discrepancies between what Marcus had promised these clients during the sales process and what our platform actually delivered. MedDevice Corp. Had been promised real-time inventory tracking that our current system couldn't support. Dataflow Industries had been sold on compliance reporting features that were still in beta testing. Sterling Manufacturing had been assured of integration capabilities that our engineering team had never even discussed. When my phone rang at 2:15, I wasn't surprised to see Patricia Wong's number. "Zoe, I just got your termination notice," Patricia said, her voice tight with stress. "Can you explain what's happening? We're 3 weeks away from our board presentation, and I built our entire operational strategy around your platform capabilities." I glanced around the office to make sure Marcus wasn't within earshot. "Patricia, I'm following new company protocols for client communications. All discussions need to go through our HR department now." "But you're our account manager. We've worked together for 18 months. This doesn't make sense." The pain in Patricia's voice cut straight through me. She had trusted me, and now I was delivering news that could damage her standing with her own leadership team. But I also knew that if I deviated from Marcus's directive, I would be fired immediately and unable to help any of my clients. "I understand your concerns," I said carefully. "I'd recommend reaching out to our HR department directly for clarification on our service delivery timeline." After ending the call, I sat back in my chair and really looked at what was happening. Marcus hadn't just been making poor strategic decisions. He had been systematically misrepresenting our capabilities to close deals, and now he was trying to quietly terminate clients before they could expose the gap between promises and reality. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table while Emma worked on her 3rd-grade math homework. Our small apartment in South Austin felt cozy with its mismatched furniture and Emma's artwork covering the refrigerator, but my mind was churning through the implications of what I had discovered. My best friend Jessica called while I was making dinner. "You sound stressed," she said immediately. "What's going on with work?" I explained the situation while stirring pasta sauce, keeping my voice low so Emma wouldn't worry. Jessica worked in marketing for a nonprofit downtown, and she had a knack for seeing through corporate politics. "So your boss is basically trying to cover up a fraud by cutting you off from the clients who might expose him," Jessica summarized. "I think so, but I can't prove it yet." "Then get proof. You said he wants all communications through HR. Give him exactly what he asked for. Document everything." After Emma went to bed, I spent 3 hours reviewing every contract in my portfolio. The pattern became undeniable. Marcus had been promising capabilities we didn't have, inflating delivery timelines, and misrepresenting our integration partnerships. Worse, I found evidence that several of these promises had been made within the last 6 months, well after he knew about our development constraints. As I prepared for bed, I made a decision that would change everything. If Marcus wanted me to follow his directive perfectly, then I would comply beyond his wildest expectations. Every single client communication would go through HR, starting with termination notices that included detailed contract language about misrepresentation and investor protection clauses. He had given me the rope, and I was going to use it exactly as he had instructed. Wednesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made Austin feel electric with possibility. I arrived at the office 30 minutes early, armed with a large coffee and a detailed plan. Marcus's directive had been crystal clear, and I intended to honor it completely. I pulled up my client roster and began crafting termination notices for accounts 4 through 9. Each email was professionally written, included specific contract clause references, and copied Sarah Martinez from HR, exactly as Marcus had demanded. But as I worked through each client file, the scope of Marcus's deception became increasingly clear. Account number 4 was Dataflow Industries, led by CEO Amanda Richardson. During the sales process 6 months ago, Marcus had promised them automated compliance reporting that would generate audit-ready documents for their pharmaceutical clients. The problem was that our development team had never built this feature. When I checked our product roadmap, I found a note from our CTO saying this particular integration would require 18 months of development and partnership agreements with regulatory databases we had never contacted. I crafted Amanda's termination notice carefully, including language about changes in service delivery capabilities and referencing the contract section about material changes to promised features. Within 20 minutes of sending the email, my phone rang. "Zoe, this is Amanda Richardson. I just received a termination notice from your company. Can you help me understand what's happening?" "Amanda, as per our new company protocols, I'm required to direct all client discussions through our HR department. Sarah Martinez will be able to provide you with detailed information about any service changes." The silence on the other end of the phone lasted nearly 10 seconds. "Zoe, we've been working together for 6 months. You personally assured me that the compliance reporting would be ready for our year-end audit. My board approved a budget increase based on that timeline. Are you telling me I can't even discuss this with you directly?" My chest tightened as I heard the stress in Amanda's voice. She had been planning her entire audit strategy around features that didn't exist. But I also knew that maintaining the documentation trail was the only way to expose the full extent of Marcus's misrepresentations. "I understand this is frustrating," I said. "I'd strongly recommend contacting Sarah Martinez today to discuss your specific compliance reporting needs and our current delivery capabilities." By 10:30, I had sent termination notices to 6 clients, each one revealing another layer of impossible promises Marcus had made. Sterling Manufacturing had been sold integration with inventory systems our platform couldn't access. BrightPath Consulting had been promised custom dashboard features that would require rebuilding our entire user interface. TechFlow Dynamics had been assured of data migration services we had never offered to any client. Sarah Martinez appeared at my desk just before lunch, carrying a thick folder and wearing an expression of deep concern. "Zoe, can we talk privately?" she asked. We walked to the small conference room near the HR department. Sarah was 45 years old with graying brown hair and a reputation for fairness that had earned respect across the company. She had joined CoreTech 2 years ago from a larger technology firm, bringing experience with employment law and corporate compliance. "I need to understand what's happening with these client terminations," Sarah said, opening her folder. "I've received 6 termination notices this morning, all copying me on communications about contract violations and misrepresented capabilities. This is highly unusual." I pulled out my phone and showed her Marcus's directive email. "Sarah, I'm following my supervisor's explicit instructions. All client communications must go through HR now." Sarah read the email twice, her frown deepening with each line. "Zoe, I need you to be completely honest with me. Are you terminating these clients because they're dissatisfied with our services?" "I'm not terminating anyone," I said carefully. "I'm following Marcus's directive to copy HR on all client communications. The termination notices are being sent according to decisions Marcus made. I'm just ensuring that HR is informed about the contract implications of each cancellation." "And what contract implications are those?" I opened my laptop and pulled up the Global Tech contract language I had reviewed the night before. Most of our major clients have investor protection clauses that allow for contract termination if we materially misrepresent our capabilities. Several clients are asking about compliance reporting inventory integrations and custom features that our platform doesn't actually support. Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "Show me the contract language." For the next 45 minutes, I walked Sarah through the specific promises Marcus had made to each terminated client cross-referenced against our actual product capabilities and development roadmap. The pattern was undeniable and systematic. "Zoe, this looks like intentional misrepresentation. Have you discussed these discrepancies with Marcus directly?" "Yesterday morning. That's when he announced the new communication protocol and sent the directive email." Sarah closed her folder and sat back in her chair. I need to escalate this immediately. This kind of sales practice could expose the company to significant legal liability. As I walked back to my desk, my phone buzzed with a text message from Patricia Wong at MedDevice Corp. Zoe, my board is asking for documentation of the inventory tracking capabilities you promised. Can you send technical specifications today? I forwarded the text to Sarah and continued with my assigned task. Account number 7 was Phoenix Solutions, run by CEO Michael Torres. Marcus had promised them real-time financial dashboard integration with their accounting software. When I checked our integration partnerships, I discovered we had never established any connection with their accounting platform, and our API documentation specifically stated that real-time financial data integration was not supported. The termination notice for Phoenix Solutions included reference to Contract Section 12, which addressed delivery of promised integrations and provided termination rights if integrations proved technically impossible. I copied Sarah on the email and included documentation of our actual API capabilities. 20 minutes later, Michael Torres called our main office line and asked to speak with me directly. Our receptionist, Karen, transferred the call to my desk. Zoe, I just received a termination notice that references technical limitations with our accounting integration. This is the first I'm hearing about any problems. We're supposed to go live with your dashboard next month. Our CFO has already announced the new reporting capabilities to our board. Michael, I understand your concerns. Our new company protocol requires that all technical discussions go through HR for proper documentation. Sarah Martinez will be able to provide you with detailed specifications about our current integration capabilities. But you're our account manager. We've been planning this implementation for 4 months. Are you seriously telling me that I can't discuss technical requirements with the person who sold us the service? The frustration in Michael's voice was painful to hear, but I could also see the bigger picture forming. Every client conversation was creating documented evidence of the gap between Marcus's promises and our actual capabilities. Each call was being forwarded to Sarah, building a comprehensive record of systematic misrepresentation. By 3 o'clock, I had processed 9 client terminations. Sarah had received 23 forwarded client communications ranging from confused phone calls to angry email demands for technical documentation we couldn't provide. Her desk was covered with contract printouts, product specification sheets, and a legal pad filled with notes. That's when Marcus appeared at my workstation, his face flushed and his jaw set in a hard line. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" he demanded, his voice low but intense. I gestured toward my computer screen, which displayed the 10th termination notice I was preparing. "Following your directive from yesterday, all client communications are going through HR exactly as you instructed." "This isn't what I meant, and you know it." I opened his email on my screen and read aloud, "Effective immediately, all client communications go through HR for approval. No exceptions." I looked up at him with complete professional composure. I'm not sure how to interpret this differently. Marcus glanced around the sales floor, clearly aware that other team members were watching our interaction. "You're deliberately sabotaging client relationships." "Marcus, I'm following your explicit written instructions. If you'd like to modify the communication protocol, I'd be happy to comply with updated directives." I could see the trap closing around him. He had issued a directive in retaliation for my questions about global tech, but he couldn't rescind it without admitting that his original email was inappropriate. More importantly, changing the protocol now would look like an attempt to cover up the client service issues that HR was already investigating. Marcus stood there for nearly 30 seconds, clearly calculating his options. Finally, he walked away without another word. At 4:15, David Chen from our legal department appeared at my desk. David was our general counsel, a sharp attorney in his early 40s, who had joined CoreTech when we raised our Series B funding. His presence at my workstation sent a clear signal that the situation had escalated beyond HR's normal scope. "Zoe, I need to speak with you about client contract compliance," David said. "Can you join me in the main conference room?" As we walked toward the conference room, I noticed Sarah Martinez and Thomas Brennan from Pinnacle Ventures were already seated at the table. Thomas was our lead investor and had a reputation for thorough due diligence. His presence at this meeting meant that word about the client terminations had reached our board level. The sight of Thomas sitting at our conference table reviewing contract documents with a deep frown sent a chill down my spine. This was no longer just about Marcus's poor management decisions. This was about the fundamental integrity of our business practices, and our primary investor was personally investigating the situation. I took a seat across from Thomas, wondering if my decision to follow Marcus's directive perfectly was about to expose something much larger than I had originally suspected. Thursday morning brought news that changed everything. I arrived at my desk to find 3 missed calls from Robert Sterling at Global Tech Industries and an email from our company's main reception desk indicating that the Better Business Bureau had contacted CorTech about formal complaints filed by former clients. I continued my methodical process, preparing termination notices for accounts 10 through 15. Each email maintained the same professional tone, included specific contract language about material misrepresentation, and copied Sarah Martinez exactly as Marcus had directed. But the responses were coming faster now, and they were escalating beyond confused phone calls. Account number 10 was Bright Path Consulting, led by CEO Jennifer Walsh. Marcus had sold them a custom reporting dashboard that would integrate with 7 different data sources and provide real-time analytics for their client management process. When I reviewed our platform's actual capabilities, I discovered that we could only integrate with 2 of the 7 data sources, and our analytics engine couldn't support real-time processing for the volume of data Jennifer's company generated. The termination notice for BrightPath included specific reference to Contract Section 15, which addressed custom development deliverables and provided termination rights with full refund if promised customizations proved technically unfeasible. Within an hour of sending the email, Jennifer had called our main office 3 times demanding to speak with Marcus directly. Account number 11 was TechFlow Dynamics, where CEO Paul Henderson had been promised seamless integration with their existing customer relationship management system. The integration Marcus had described would require access to proprietary APIs that TechFlow's CRM provider had never made available to third-party platforms. Worse, Marcus had quoted a timeline of 6 weeks for integration work that our engineering team estimated would take 8 months, assuming we could even obtain the necessary API access. By noon, I had sent 6 more termination notices, and the pattern of impossible promises had become undeniable. Every single client had been sold capabilities that we simply could not deliver often, with timelines that defied technical reality. Marcus hadn't just been overselling. He had been creating systematic misrepresentation that could expose CorTech to massive legal liability. That's when the first bombshell dropped. Robert Sterling from Global Tech called our main office and asked to be transferred directly to our board of directors. When Karen at reception explained that board members weren't available for direct calls, Robert had calmly stated that he was formally invoking the investor protection clause in his contract and required immediate discussion with CorTech's primary investor about material misrepresentation of platform capabilities. 20 minutes later, Thomas Brennan from Pinnacle Ventures called our CEO directly. I was preparing the termination notice for account number 12 when Marcus stormed across the sales floor, his face red with anger and his usual composure completely gone. "Emergency sales meeting conference room now," he announced to the entire team. The 8 members of our sales team gathered in the main conference room while Marcus paced behind the head of the table. Jennifer from Northwest Territory looked confused. Paul from Enterprise Sales kept glancing at his phone. Derek from Small Business Accounts appeared genuinely concerned about the tension crackling in the air. "We're dealing with some communication issues that are affecting client relationships." Marcus began, his voice tight with controlled anger. "It seems that certain team members have been creating confusion by copying HR on routine client communications." He looked directly at me as he continued. "This has led to unnecessary escalation and client concerns that could have been handled through normal account management processes." I raised my hand politely. "Marcus, I'm just following the communication protocol you established on Tuesday. Your email specifically stated that all client communications should go through HR with no exceptions." The room fell silent. Jennifer and Paul exchanged glances. Derek looked down at his notepad, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. "That directive was intended for specific situations," Marcus said, his voice rising slightly, "not for routine account management." I pulled out my phone and opened his email. "Would you like me to read your directive again?" Quote, "Effective immediately. All client communications go through HR for approval. No exceptions." End quote. Paul from Enterprise Sales spoke up. Marcus, that seems pretty clear. If you want Zoe to handle communications differently, maybe you should send a revised directive. Marcus's jaw clenched visibly. He was trapped by his own words issued in retaliation for my questioning of the global tech termination. He couldn't admit that the directive was inappropriate without exposing his motivations, and he couldn't change it now without looking like he was trying to cover up the client service issues that had already reached our investors. "I want everyone to focus on maintaining positive client relationships," Marcus said finally. "We'll revisit communication protocols as needed." As the meeting broke up, Jennifer approached me near the door. "Zoe, what's really going on? I've never seen Marcus this rattled." I glanced around to make sure Marcus was out of earshot. "I'm just following company protocols and copying HR on client communications as directed. It turns out that some of our client contracts have compliance implications that HR needs to review." That afternoon, the cascade effect accelerated beyond anything I had anticipated. At 2:30, Thomas Brennan from Pinnacle Ventures arrived at our office unannounced. I watched through the glass walls as he walked directly to Marcus's office, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the kind of serious expression that meant business. Marcus jumped up from his desk when Thomas appeared in his doorway, clearly surprised by the unexpected visit. Through the glass, I could see Marcus gesturing animatedly while Thomas sat calmly reviewing documents from his portfolio. The conversation lasted 20 minutes, and Marcus's body language grew increasingly defensive as it progressed. When Thomas emerged from Marcus's office, he walked directly to the reception desk and asked Karen to contact David Chen, our legal counsel, for an immediate meeting. Then he approached my workstation. "Ms. Patterson, I'm Thomas Brennan from Pinnacle Ventures. I understand you've been handling client communications according to new company protocols. Could you spare a few minutes to walk me through your recent client interactions?" My heart rate spiked, but I maintained professional composure. "Of course, Mr. Brennan. I'd be happy to explain how I've been following the communication directives from management." We walked to the smaller conference room where Thomas spread several client contracts across the table. I recognized Global Tech's agreement along with contracts for MedDevice Corp, Dataflow Industries, and BrightPath Consulting. "I've been reviewing the investor protection clauses in these agreements," Thomas said. "Several clients have contacted our office directly about concerns regarding material misrepresentation of platform capabilities. Can you help me understand the technical specifications that were promised during the sales process?" For the next hour, I walked Thomas through the specific promises Marcus had made to each client, cross-referenced against our actual product capabilities. I showed him Marcus's sales presentations, our platform's technical documentation, and the development roadmap that proved we couldn't deliver the promised features within the quoted timelines. Thomas took detailed notes as I explained each discrepancy. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and studied his notes for several minutes. "Ms. Patterson, these appear to be systematic misrepresentations that could expose CorTech to significant legal and financial liability. The investor protection clauses in these contracts could trigger broader review of our due diligence process. Mr. Brennan, I want to be clear that I'm simply following the communication protocol established by my supervisor. I'm copying HR on all client interactions as directed." Thomas nodded slowly. "And by following that protocol precisely, you've documented evidence of potential fraud that could jeopardize our investment and the company's upcoming funding round." The weight of his words settled over me like a blanket. I had started this process as a way to comply with Marcus's retaliatory directive, but I had uncovered something much more serious than poor management. This was about the fundamental integrity of CorTech's business practices, and our primary investor was now personally investigating potential fraud. At 4 o'clock, Thomas requested an emergency meeting with our entire board of directors. By 4:30, cars were pulling into our parking lot as board members arrived for an unscheduled session. David Chen spent an hour in the conference room with Thomas reviewing contracts and taking notes on legal liability. As I prepared to leave for the day, Sarah Martinez approached my desk with a thick folder and a worried expression. "Zoe, I need you to know that this situation has escalated beyond normal HR procedures. Thomas Brennan has requested a formal review of all sales practices, and the board is considering bringing in external auditors to examine our client contracts." "Sarah, I'm just following the directive I was given. If there are compliance issues with our client relationships, shouldn't those be addressed through proper channels?" Sarah looked around the office, then leaned closer to my desk. "Between you and me, I think you may have uncovered something that could save this company from massive legal exposure. But I also want you to be prepared for the fact that this investigation is going to intensify quickly. That evening, as I drove home through Austin traffic, my phone buzzed with a text from a local business reporter who had somehow gotten my number. The message read, "Heard there might be a story developing at CorTech. Would you be willing to discuss client service practices?" I deleted the message without responding, but the reality was becoming clear. My decision to follow Marcus's directive perfectly had set in motion a chain of events that could transform CorTech, completely expose systematic fraud, and potentially destroy the career of the man who had tried to retaliate against me for asking honest questions. As I picked up Emma from after-school care, I realized that tomorrow would bring consequences none of us had anticipated when Marcus sent that angry email on Tuesday morning. Friday morning arrived with the kind of tension that made our normally bustling office feel like a pressure cooker waiting to explode. I continued my systematic approach, preparing termination notices for accounts 16 through 20. Each email maintained the same professional documentation process that had already exposed systematic misrepresentation across our client portfolio. Account number 16 was Precision Analytics, led by CEO Rachel Thompson. Marcus had promised them predictive modeling capabilities that would analyze their client data and generate forecasts for market trends. The technical requirements for this feature included machine learning algorithms that our platform had never incorporated, data processing volumes that would require server infrastructure we didn't possess, and integration with financial databases that required licensing agreements we had never pursued. The termination notice for Precision Analytics referenced Contract Section 21, which addressed advanced analytics deliverables and provided termination rights. If promised, modeling capabilities proved technically impossible within stated timelines. Within 30 minutes of sending the email, Rachel had called our main office demanding immediate technical documentation for features that existed only in Marcus's sales presentations. By 10 o'clock, I had processed 4 more client terminations, and the emergency board meeting convened in our largest conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see Thomas Brennan from Pinnacle Ventures, our CEO, Linda Morrison, our CFO, Janet Phillips, David Chen from Legal, and 3 external board members who had flown in overnight from San Francisco and New York. At 10:45, Sarah Martinez appeared at my desk with a formal request. "Zoe, the board would like you to present your findings about client contract compliance. They need to understand the scope of the issues you've documented through your communication protocol." My hands trembled slightly as I gathered my laptop contract printouts and the detailed notes I had compiled over the past 4 days. This wasn't just about following Marcus's directive anymore. This was about presenting evidence to our board of directors and primary investor about potential systematic fraud. The conference room felt enormous as I entered and took a seat across from Thomas Brennan. The board members had spread client contracts across the entire table, and everyone's expressions conveyed the seriousness of the situation. "Ms. Patterson," Linda Morrison began, "we understand that you've been documenting client communications according to management directives. Can you walk us through what you've discovered about our service delivery capabilities?" For the next 90 minutes, I presented a comprehensive analysis of the promises Marcus had made to our 20 clients compared to our actual platform capabilities. I showed them Marcus's sales presentations, our engineering specifications, and the development timelines that proved we couldn't deliver promised features within quoted timeframes. The room grew quieter with each example. When I explained that Marcus had promised Dataflow Industries compliance reporting that would require 18 months of development we had never authorized, Janet Phillips actually put her head in her hands. When I demonstrated that BrightPath Consulting had been sold custom dashboard features that would require rebuilding our entire user interface, David Chen started taking furious notes about legal liability. But the moment that changed everything came when Thomas Brennan asked a simple question. "Ms. Patterson, in your review of these client accounts, have you noticed any patterns in commission payments or revenue recognition?" I pulled up our internal sales tracking system on my laptop. "Actually, yes. I noticed some discrepancies when I was reviewing contract dates for the termination notices." What I showed them next sent shockwaves through the room. Marcus had been altering contract close dates in our system to make deals appear to close in different quarters. A contract that was actually signed on January 15th had been backdated to December 28th to boost fourth quarter numbers. A deal that closed on April 3rd had been moved to March 31st to inflate first quarter revenue. But David Chen discovered something even more damaging. When he pulled up our payroll system to cross-reference commission payments, we found evidence that Marcus had been claiming commission on deals closed by terminated employees. "This is Jenny Rodriguez's account," I said, pointing to a client contract worth $60,000 annually. Jenny was fired 3 months ago for what Marcus called performance issues, but she had already closed this deal and earned commission. Marcus processed the commission payment to himself after her termination. The silence in the room was deafening. Linda Morrison leaned back in her chair, staring at the payroll records that showed Marcus had pocketed commission payments totaling nearly $40,000 from deals closed by terminated employees. Thomas Brennan was the first to speak. "This isn't just misrepresentation of capabilities. This is embezzlement and fraud that could trigger criminal charges." David Chen nodded grimly. "The altered contract dates constitute securities fraud if we've reported this revenue to investors or used it in funding presentations. The commission theft is straightforward embezzlement." That's when Janet Phillips broke down completely. Through tears, she admitted that Marcus had been pressuring her to manipulate quarterly reports to meet investor expectations. He had demanded that revenue be recognized earlier than our accounting standards allowed, and he had threatened her job when she expressed concerns about compliance violations. He said that missing our targets would cost everyone their jobs when the funding round failed, Janet said, wiping her eyes with a tissue Sarah provided. "I knew the revenue recognition was wrong, but I was afraid to speak up." Linda Morrison stood and walked to the window overlooking our parking lot. This company was supposed to be built on integrity and authentic client relationships. What Marcus has done could destroy everything we've worked to create. Thomas Brennan consulted his notes for several minutes before addressing the room. "Based on the evidence presented, I recommend that Marcus be placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. We'll need to bring in external forensic accountants to examine our financial records and legal experts to assess our liability exposure." The board voted unanimously to suspend Marcus and authorize a comprehensive audit of our sales practices. David Chen was tasked with filing the necessary reports with regulatory authorities. Linda Morrison would take over direct management of the sales team while we searched for a new VP of sales. But then Thomas made an offer that surprised everyone in the room. "Ms. Patterson, your documentation of these issues has potentially saved CorTech from catastrophic legal and financial exposure. Would you be interested in serving as interim VP of Client Relations while we restructure our sales organization?" My heart pounded as I considered the implications. 4 days ago, I was an account manager being retaliated against for asking honest questions. Now I was being offered a senior leadership position with equity participation and direct responsibility for rebuilding client trust. "I'd be honored to help rebuild our client relationships," I said, "but I have one condition. We need complete transparency with every affected client about what happened, and our commitment to delivering the capabilities we promise." Thomas smiled for this first time since entering our office. "That's exactly the approach that will restore investor confidence and client loyalty." As the board meeting concluded, Sarah Martinez approached me with paperwork for my new role and a sincere expression of gratitude. "Zoe, I want you to know that your decision to follow Marcus's directive precisely may have saved this entire company. Your documentation provided the evidence we needed to address systematic fraud before it destroyed our reputation." Walking back to my desk as the newly appointed interim VP of Client Relations, I realized that Marcus's retaliatory email had backfired in ways he never could have imagined. His attempt to silence my questions had instead given me the platform to expose the truth and transform CorTech into the ethical company it had always claimed to be. Monday morning marked my first day as interim VP of Client Relations, and I approached the final phase of my systematic documentation with a completely different strategy. Instead of termination notices, I would be sending restoration communications to clients 21 through 24, explaining the situation honestly and offering comprehensive remediation. My new office had windows overlooking downtown Austin, and the view reminded me of how far CorTech had come from its 6-client startup origins. But more importantly, it symbolized the opportunity to rebuild our company culture around authentic relationships and transparent communication. Account number 21 was Global Tech Industries, where this entire situation had begun. Robert Sterling deserved to hear directly from me about the management changes and our commitment to delivering the capabilities his contract specified. Instead of a termination notice, I crafted a detailed email explaining Marcus's suspension, the board's investigation findings, and our plan to fulfill every promise made in his original agreement. The response came within 2 hours, and it surprised me completely. "Zoe, I've been hoping for exactly this kind of communication," Robert wrote back. "Your honesty about the situation gives me confidence that CorTech is serious about rebuilding trust. I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss not just maintaining our current contract, but potentially expanding our partnership." Account 22 was Phoenix Solutions, where CEO Michael Torres had been promised financial dashboard integration that our platform couldn't support. I called Michael directly and spent 40 minutes explaining the technical limitations Marcus had concealed our plan to develop the necessary integrations over the next 8 months, and our offer to provide interim solutions at no additional cost while we built the promised capabilities. "Zoe, I have to tell you that your honesty is refreshing," Michael said. "Most vendors would have continued making excuses or tried to cover up the limitations. The fact that you're proactively addressing the situation makes me want to continue our partnership." By Wednesday, I had contacted all 24 clients personally explaining the situation and offering comprehensive remediation plans. The response pattern was remarkable instead of demanding contract cancellation. 18 clients expressed appreciation for the transparency and requested meetings to discuss expanded partnerships. The transformation wasn't just happening with external clients. Our internal culture was shifting as the sales team embraced the new standards for honest communication and realistic timeline commitments. Jennifer from Northwest Territory told me that clients were responding more positively to truthful discussions about capabilities than they ever had to exaggerated promises. Thursday brought news that Marcus had been arrested on charges of embezzlement and securities fraud. The local Business Journal ran a front-page story about corporate accountability in Austin's technology sector, featuring CorTech as an example of how companies could address systematic misconduct through transparent investigation and remediation. But the real vindication came Friday afternoon when Thomas Brennan called me into the conference room with incredible news. "Zoe, Pinnacle Ventures has completed our review of CorTech's management changes and remediation efforts. We're not only maintaining our current investment, we're authorizing the Series C funding round with a 40% increase in company valuation. The increase was based on improved client retention rates, enhanced investor confidence in our management integrity, and market recognition of our commitment to transparent business practices. My approach to client restoration had actually strengthened our business relationships beyond their previous levels. Additionally," Thomas continued, "the board has voted to offer you the permanent position of VP of Client Relations with an equity stake that reflects your contribution to saving and transforming this company." 3 weeks later, I stood before our entire team at CorTech's first all-company meeting since the management changes. 42 employees had gathered in our main conference area to hear about our new direction and the results of our client restoration efforts. When I first joined CorTech 3 years ago, we had 6 clients and a vision of revolutionizing small business software. I began. Today we have 38 active clients, stronger relationships than we've ever maintained, and a company culture built on integrity rather than inflated promises. The numbers told an incredible story. Our client retention rate had increased to 94%, the highest in company history. Average contract value had grown by 30% as clients appreciated honest assessments of capabilities and realistic delivery timelines. Most remarkably, our client satisfaction scores had reached all-time highs. The lesson we've learned is that authentic relationships always outperform manipulative sales tactics. I continued. When we tell clients the truth about what we can deliver, and when we can deliver it, they trust us with bigger projects and longer-term partnerships. After the meeting, I returned to my office and found a handwritten note from Jenny Rodriguez, the former sales representative whose commission payments Marcus had stolen. The investigation had resulted in full restitution of her earnings, plus additional compensation for wrongful termination. "Zoe, thank you for having the courage to expose the truth. Your decision to follow that directive exactly as written saved my career and restored my faith in corporate integrity." Jenny had written. That evening, I sat in my apartment with Emma helping her with a school project about community heroes. She had chosen to write about whistleblowers and people who stand up for fairness in difficult situations. "Mommy, what made you decide to keep sending those emails when your boss was being mean to you?" Emma asked. I thought about her question carefully. Sometimes when people try to silence you, the most powerful response is to do exactly what they ask, but do it so completely that it exposes the truth they're trying to hide. Did it work? I smiled and showed her the local business magazine featuring Cortex transformation and my recognition as Ethics Leader of the Year. It worked better than I ever imagined possible, sweetheart. As Emma worked on her project, I reflected on how Marcus's retaliatory directive had become the catalyst for Cortex transformation into a company I was genuinely proud to lead. His attempt to punish me for asking honest questions had instead given me the documentation trail I needed to expose systematic fraud and rebuild our business around authentic client relationships. The irony was perfect. Marcus's directive to copy HR on all communications had created the transparency that saved Cortec and established the foundation for sustainable growth based on integrity rather than deception. 6 months after the management restructuring, Cortec had become something I never could have imagined during those tense days of systematic client documentation. Our client base had grown to 52 accounts. Our revenue had increased 60% year over year, and we had become a case study in ethical business transformation taught at 3 major university business schools. The recognition started locally. Austin Business Journal named me Ethics Leader of the Year for demonstrating how individual courage could transform corporate culture and protect stakeholder interests. The award ceremony was held at the Four Seasons downtown, with business leaders from across Central Texas recognizing companies that prioritized integrity over short-term profits. When faced with retaliation for asking honest questions, Zoe Patterson chose perfect compliance over silent submission, the presenter announced. Her decision to follow her supervisor's directive exactly as written exposed systematic fraud, protected client interests, and transformed Cortec into a model of transparent business practices. But the local recognition was just the beginning. Harvard Business School contacted me about developing a case study for their MBA program on ethical decision-making in corporate environments. The case would examine how following problematic directives completely and transparently could expose institutional misconduct while protecting individual employees from retaliation. Professor Sarah Kim from Harvard's Business Ethics Department spent 2 days at Cortec interviewing me, Thomas Brennan, and several clients about the decision-making process that had led to our transformation. What makes your situation unique, Professor Kim explained, is that you found a way to resist misconduct without directly defying authority. By following the directive precisely, you created documentation that exposed the truth while protecting yourself legally. The Harvard case study led to speaking invitations at business conferences across the country. I addressed the National Association of Corporate Compliance Officers in Chicago, speaking about strategic documentation as ethical protection. The audience of 200 compliance professionals responded enthusiastically to the practical approach of using required processes to expose misconduct. At the Women in Technology Leadership Conference in San Francisco, I presented Authentic Client Relationships in the Age of Metrics to an audience of female executives from Fortune 500 companies. The presentation focused on how honest communication about capabilities could actually improve client retention and contract value compared to exaggerated promises. The business case for integrity is stronger than most leaders realize, I told the audience. When clients trust that you'll tell them the truth about limitations, they're more likely to trust you with sensitive projects and strategic partnerships. But the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The Federal Trade Commission invited me to testify before a congressional subcommittee examining corporate accountability in the technology sector. The hearing was part of broader legislation designed to protect consumers from misleading sales practices and strengthen whistleblower protections for employees who expose misconduct. Testifying before Congress was surreal. The hearing room in the Hart Senate Office Building was packed with journalists, corporate representatives, and advocacy groups. Senator Maria Gonzalez from California chaired the subcommittee, and her questions focused on practical strategies for protecting employees who report ethical violations. Ms. Patterson, your case demonstrates that employees don't always need to choose between loyalty to their employer and protection of stakeholder interests, Senator Gonzalez observed. Can you explain how your approach could be replicated in other industries? Senator, the key principle is documentation and transparency, I responded. When management issues directives that seem problematic, following them completely while ensuring proper oversight creates accountability without direct confrontation. In my case, copying HR on all communications wasn't defiance. It was compliance that happened to expose misconduct. The hearing resulted in bipartisan support for legislation strengthening whistleblower protections and requiring companies to establish clear channels for reporting ethical concerns without fear of retaliation. Personal changes accompanied the professional recognition. I had been dating David Martinez, a client advocate attorney I met during the congressional hearings for 3 months. David specialized in representing small businesses in contract disputes with software vendors, and he appreciated Cortex's transformation toward transparent client communication. Emma was thriving in her new private school funded by my equity compensation from Cortex's successful Series C funding round. She had developed an interest in business ethics and often asked thoughtful questions about fairness and honesty in professional relationships. "Mommy, why don't all companies just tell the truth about what they can do?" Emma asked during one of our dinner conversations. "Some leaders think that exaggerating capabilities will help them win more business," I explained. "But what they don't realize is that honest relationships usually last longer and become more valuable over time." The industry recognition culminated with an invitation to join Pinnacle Ventures as a partner specializing in ethical investment due diligence. Thomas Brennan offered me the opportunity to work with portfolio companies on building sustainable business practices and authentic stakeholder relationships. "Your experience at Cortex demonstrated something we hadn't fully appreciated," Thomas explained during our lunch meeting at South by Southwest. "Companies that prioritize integrity actually perform better financially over the long term. We want you to help our other investments achieve that same transformation." The offer represented a natural evolution of my career, combining my expertise in client relations with my experience in exposing and addressing corporate misconduct. I would work with technology startups to establish transparent sales practices, authentic client communication standards, and ethical decision-making frameworks from their earliest stages of development. Cortex transformation had also inspired industry-wide changes. The Cortex standard became adopted terminology for transparent client communication and realistic capability representation. Software industry conferences featured panels on honest sales practices and building trust through transparency. Other companies began implementing what became known as ZOE protocols, requiring all client communications to be documented and reviewed for accuracy of capability claims. The protocols protected both companies and clients by ensuring that promises made during sales processes aligned with actual product capabilities. As I prepared for my transition to Pinnacle Ventures, I reflected on the unexpected journey that had started with Marcus's retaliatory email 18 months earlier. His directive to copy HR on all communications had been intended to silence my questions and isolate me from client relationships. Instead, it had given me the platform to expose systematic fraud, transform corporate culture, and become an advocate for ethical business practices across an entire industry. The recognition felt gratifying, but the real satisfaction came from knowing that hundreds of clients were now working with companies that prioritized honest communication and realistic expectations over manipulative sales tactics. 2 years after sending my first termination notice with HR copied, I stood at the podium of Harvard Business School's largest auditorium delivering the keynote address for their annual Business Ethics Summit. The audience of 600 MBA students, faculty, and industry leaders represented the future of American corporate leadership, and my message focused on the transformative power of strategic integrity. When I received that retaliatory email from my supervisor, I faced a choice that every professional encounters at some point in their career. I began. I could either submit silently to unfair treatment, or I could find a way to resist misconduct while protecting myself legally and professionally. The Harvard case study based on Cortex transformation had become required reading in business ethics courses at 47 universities nationwide. Students analyzed the decision-making process that led to my systematic documentation approach, examining how perfect compliance with problematic directives could expose institutional misconduct while maintaining legal protection. The lesson isn't that you should always follow orders blindly, I continued. The lesson is that strategic compliance combined with transparent documentation can be more powerful than direct confrontation when addressing systematic misconduct. Cortex's story had become a template for corporate transformation. Our successful IPO 6 months earlier had achieved the highest ethics ratings in the software sector, with institutional investors specifically citing our transparent business practices as a key factor in their decision to participate. The company that had nearly collapsed under Marcus's fraudulent sales practices was now worth $400 million and employed over 200 people committed to authentic client relationships. My personal journey had been equally transformative. The equity stake from Cortex's IPO had provided financial security I had never imagined possible. Emma was excelling in her sophomore year of high school, where she served as president of the Ethics Club and had already been accepted to an early admission program at the University of Texas Business School. My relationship with David had deepened into a partnership built on shared commitment to corporate accountability and client advocacy. We had married the previous spring in a ceremony attended by colleagues from across the technology industry who had been influenced by Cortex's transformation. But the most meaningful change was my role as a founding partner at the Institute for Corporate Integrity, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting employees who expose misconduct and helping companies build sustainable ethical practices. The Institute provided legal support for whistleblowers, training programs for corporate leaders, and research on the business benefits of transparent operations. The Institute has supported over 300 cases of employees reporting misconduct in the past 18 months, I told the Harvard audience. In 80% of those cases, companies that addressed the reported issues honestly experienced improved financial performance within 2 years. The federal legislation inspired by my congressional testimony had passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. The Corporate Accountability and Employee Protection Act required companies with federal contracts to establish clear channels for reporting ethical concerns and provided legal protection for employees who documented misconduct through appropriate channels. Marcus's story had ended with federal conviction on charges of embezzlement, securities fraud, and mail fraud. He had been sentenced to 3 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution to affected clients and employees. His case became a landmark example of how individual misconduct could escalate into criminal charges when it involved systematic fraud and investor deception. The broader industry transformation had exceeded my most optimistic expectations. The Cortex standard for transparent client communication had been adopted by over 500 technology companies, creating industry-wide improvements in client satisfaction and contract compliance. Software industry conferences now featured mandatory sessions on ethical sales practices and authentic capability representation. What started as one person following a problematic directive exactly as written has become a movement toward transparency and accountability across an entire industry. I concluded my Harvard presentation. The lesson for future business leaders is that individual courage combined with strategic thinking and proper documentation can create transformation far beyond what seems possible in the moment. After my presentation, a first-year MBA student approached me with a question that perfectly captured the essence of the transformation. Ms. Patterson, what advice would you give to someone facing a similar situation where their supervisor is asking them to compromise ethical standards? I thought carefully before responding. First, document everything. Second, find ways to ensure transparency and oversight without directly defying authority. Third, remember that short-term discomfort from standing up for integrity is almost always preferable to long-term consequences of participating in misconduct. And most importantly, I added, remember that authentic relationships and honest communication create more sustainable value than deception and manipulation. Companies that prioritize integrity don't just avoid legal problems. They actually perform better financially because they build trust that leads to longer-term partnerships and stronger stakeholder loyalty. That evening, I returned to Austin and had dinner with Emma, who was working on a college application essay about ethical leadership and individual responsibility. "Mom, what do you think made the difference in your situation?" Emma asked as we reviewed her essay draft. "What made you decide to follow that directive so completely instead of just complying minimally?" "I realized that Marcus's directive was actually giving me permission to create transparency," I replied. "By copying HR on every communication, I was following his orders while ensuring that other people could see the full picture of what was happening with our clients." "So you used his own words against him?" "I used his own words to protect our clients and expose the truth. That's the power of strategic compliance. When you follow problematic directives completely and transparently, you create accountability that can't be dismissed or ignored." As Emma finished her essay that night, I reflected on how a single retaliatory email had become the catalyst for transformation that touched hundreds of companies, thousands of employees, and countless clients who now experienced more honest business relationships. The journey from account manager to industry advocate had taught me that individual actions, when guided by integrity and strategic thinking, could create ripple effects far beyond their original scope. Marcus's attempt to silence my questions had instead amplified my voice and provided a platform for advocating authentic business practices across an entire sector. The lesson that emerged from Cortex transformation was both simple and profound when faced with unfair treatment or institutional misconduct. Perfect compliance with problematic directives, combined with transparent documentation, could be more powerful than direct confrontation. By following Marcus's directive exactly as written, I had created accountability that exposed systematic fraud while protecting myself legally and professionally. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone tried to silence your questions or concerns about fairness and integrity? Sometimes the most powerful response to intimidation is perfect compliance that creates transparency and accountability. Share your thoughts in the comments about how you've handled situations where doing the right thing required strategic thinking rather than direct confrontation. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others discover the power of strategic integrity in professional relationships. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about people who found courage in difficult situations and created positive change through ethical leadership. And please share this story with anyone who might benefit from understanding how individual actions can transform entire organizations when guided by authenticity and strategic thinking. Thank you for joining me on this journey of transformation and growth. Remember that your commitment to integrity and honest communication can create change far beyond what seems possible in challenging moments. Until next time, keep standing up for what's right and building authentic relationships that create lasting value for everyone involved.